So
Right.
yes, and we'll pop this up real quick because this is something that's been kind of, to me, the fact like this is, to me, this is one of the first legal fuck ups. Why would you post this publicly? This as a practice, you never fucking do this, right? It's a horrible practice to publicly post a termination notice, is inviting a legal nightmare. As corporate counsel, like, people know me from doing representing special districts as well. I did that when I was younger as a younger attorney in Florida, representing Reedy Creek, which is why I cover the Disney issues. We would never post a notice of contract termination publicly. This is insane. This goes to her lawyer. This goes to her, right? That's about it, right? And I'm not, once again, not an expert, not a Japanese lawyer, right? But where I think my experience as an attorney in general, and also somebody who has interacted a lot with attorneys in Japan as well, right, makes me a little bit more qualified than at least most folks in America and most of the standard drama commenters on the internet. So this notice, if we pull this up, they got into just a lot of stuff where they shouldn't have got into it in terms of, okay, she violated these activity rules, right? These alleged activity rules. Let me kind of, Epsilon says that can't help it that Nijisanji PR team is run by 4 rats in a trench coat. It's also, like we just mentioned, like Gator just mentioned, it's the problem. It's run by Japanese folks that do not understand the perception of this, particularly in the English-speaking world, right? And also that doing these statements, they have to be really, really carefully thought through, and you cannot put information like this out here and just expect everybody to take it and it to be okay, right? That's not going to happen. What they're saying here is, okay, we terminated Selen, and I am going to summarize, due to breaches of essentially their rules, right, of their policies. And that would amount to breach of contract. Now, that is something I'm generally familiar, because breach of contract is fairly international, right? The rules regarding a lot of other different types of law, criminal law, even certain types of civil law are different, but breach of contract is actually one of the things that's pretty international. And just so you guys know, because one of the big issues is venue. With breach of contract, typically you look at where the defendant's headquarters is, where their place of business is, and also if it's stipulated in the contract or stipulated anywhere else or wherever the work is primarily taking place, which clearly would be Japan. So for the breach of contract claim, the venue would definitely be Japan. So Gator, does that make sense to you? Does that analysis make sense to you?
Right, because it's a Japanese company and the contract is ostensibly a contract with a Japanese company. The proper venue would be Japan in terms of anything regarding employment.
Yes, regarding employment, right? So specifically regarding employment. So they have this, general activity rules, which they say damage to the reputation or credibility of third parties. Real quick, this is Japanese law here. So this bit here where they talk about damage to the reputation or credibility of third parties. This is something you need to pay a very close attention to whenever you analyze Japanese issues. And this is something a lot of people get wrong. The defamation laws, the copyright laws, they go especially way further in Japan than the US. There are moral rights to IP that do not exist in the US. There are protections that go further than that allow for pretty severe damages if you do anything without the permission of somebody who you might need to get the permission of. For example, famously, right, if you were doing a walking stream and there was somebody in the walking stream, where you're going down the street with a camera, and somebody objected to that, you would have to remedy that pretty quickly or instantly, which is why a lot of times it's just better to blur the faces. Because if somebody was to object to that or have a problem with that, you're in deep trouble in Japan. So understand that reputation, credibility, that language is much more powerful than it might be on the US side. Or involves socially condemned behaviors. As a company, we are confident that in order to deliver content for our fans to enjoy in the long term and to create an environment where our affiliated livers can safely perform their activities with the support of fans and stakeholders, it is essential for both our livers and company to unite. That's a very Japanese concept there. Right, which they might as well say employees, right? But the livers mean specifically the VTuber talent employees. So
Right.
they have to unite and adhere to the compliance rules. Very Japanese framing there, guys. Despite our efforts to uphold these rules, Selen repeatedly violated the activity rules since joining Nijisanji, going all the way back to 2021. So they're trying to document the whole thing. There have been ongoing reports about the inappropriate behavior by Selen Tatsuki throughout our time as an Nijisanji liver. We've been addressing these concerns. And this is just page 1. We'll go to page 2. But even here, guys, what they've said is already pretty defamatory if it's not true. But it seems like if we talk about infringement on third-party property rights, my understanding, Gator, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that she, in reality, did not violate anybody's copyright or IP laws, that she had permissions for everything that she did.
She even reached out to the original author of the song that she used, Lily Pichu, and got her explicit permission, and was actually working behind the scenes trying to get management to just kind of give the okay and reach out to these people. They didn't do it. So on her own behalf, she went and talked to these people and got the permission to use all of the assets, to use all of the art, to use the song.
Yeah, so she had that permission. There was no actual infringement upon the rights of other livers or anybody in general, right? Third parties, right? So that could be random people. And look, I understand like workflow is something that was a debate. I believe there was a debate about how long it took them to get back. And I know some people, and once again, I'm trying to be objective here, and provide a pretty level-headed analysis. Some people were, I think, mad, Gator, that the permissions, the management permissions for posting the video were taking too long. I think it was something like 41 hours that they essentially didn't respond to her, so she just posted it. To be honest with you guys, look, I've worked in a corporate environment and I've done a lot of things that should have taken 10 minutes and they took a week. So I don't want to say in terms of an internal workflow of a company that whether that's reasonable or unreasonable. And, we'd have to look at her contract as to what they would stipulate and like how fast they would get back, which probably, once again, people don't have a contract lawyer looking over that when they sign. This is part of the unequal power between an employee and a company. This is something that you would want a lawyer looking at and saying, no, if I post something, you should have to approve this within 24 hours.
And Chad's bringing up a good point too, that, she got permission from Lily Pichu back in 2022. It's not like this project was something she came up with spur of the moment and was done really quickly and then just like instantly released. It was something that was a long-term project that she had planned for at least a year. And, as we kind of go into more detail about other things that have been going on, we see that this is a pattern of behavior. It wasn't like she just, this was the first time that management ghosted her and she kind of had to take things into her own hands. This is a pattern of behavior which will not play in Nijisanji's favor.
And let me point this out here too, guys. Just because like if I comment on something like it's not legal, that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it moral. It doesn't make it ethical. And once again, the allegation that Nijisanji is a black company, which for those that don't know, black company is a very specific term in Japan for a company that violates Japanese labor standards, that overworks you, that pushes you, that engages in workplace bullying or harassment, which we were talking about this before the show. I was talking about this with Gator before the show. In Japan, and also I was in Korea as well, it tends to be more common even in regular workplaces where there's a dynamic of power where it's like you do this or else, right? Or you do this or, we will do X, right? It's like you do this or we will terminate your visa, right? So obviously some VTubers are probably in Japan. Maybe they're on a work visa. We'll terminate your work visa, right? We will, punish you. We will destroy your reputation. We will not pay you, right? Whatever the thing is that they're threatening to do, right? They may do that, right? As a company. And the worse you go, it's more of a sliding scale, right? All companies in Japan are pretty hard to work with, but a black company is the worst. What is becoming more clear is Nijisanji is on definitely pushing towards one side of this equation, even if what they're doing is not necessarily illegal, right? So for example, the workflow, that itself, the approval itself may not have been a legal breach of contract, but it doesn't make it a good thing, right? That's in fact, it might be a tactic used to control her, like which is fucked up, by the way. And I'm gonna be very clear about that. It's fucked up. It's extremely fucked up, but might not necessarily be illegal.
Right.
These actions led to various misunderstandings that damaged the reputation of Annie-Color and Nijisan En. In an effort to calm the situation, we sought to either publicly disclose the reasons for making it private or have Selen disclose them herself, while being mindful of her physical and mental health. So this is before she's really commented on that. So they're just even saying something like that is an implication that it like there might be an issue there, and that's a dangerous implication to put in any document. I think,
right, and this also runs afoul of Canadian law here, because the Canadian law that governs protected health information and personal information is PIPEDA. Some people in chat may be familiar with the U.S. law HIPAA, but that specifically covers protected health information in terms of the healthcare industry. With PIPEDA,
yes.
it's even more stringent in Canada because it's not just protected health information. It's also like your address, loans that you have, that's protected information. Anything about you personally, so like your age, mental status, disabilities, even simple things like so like your employment history. That's
really?
that's another thing they can't disclose stuff like that. Anything that could personally identify you cannot be disclosed without your authorization.
And that's a big deal, guys. You got to understand. I know that we have our common conception of these things, and we kind of romanticize these laws, but that's not exactly how they work, right? But obviously, Canada's more stringent. So when I think about claims and I think about Canada, that specifically bringing the information privacy, that could be brought in Canada. And I think that's some of the strongest claims, the ones that can be brought in Canada rather than in Japan, because that is a Canada-specific thing. So the appropriate venue for that would be Canada, because she's a Canadian citizen, right?
She's a Canadian citizen, and her information is in Canada.
It's in Canada, right? That makes this a claim. So you can bring both claims. You can bring in Canada a privacy claim, and in Japan you could do the employment and employment breach of contract, right? Which, once again, it's going to be an uphill battle in Japan just because you're fighting against a Japanese company, right, with huge resources. But in Canada, you might have a way better time and a way easier time sealing the deal regarding that information in Canada against Nijisanji. By the way, once again, this is the law, not morality. Is it right to share people's private information? No, not at all. I think morally it's bankrupt, right? But we're talking about the law here. Then here's the line: was being harassed by other affiliated livers due to mismanagement, while refusing to acknowledge her responsibility for violating the activity rule. So this one here, I think, is particularly troublesome because it brings in the other livers, right? So the other livers are now brought in here because the harassment is keyed to the other livers. If this is untrue, this is a extreme damage to those other livers. In fact, I would say those other livers in some cases might even have claims against Nijisanji themselves, just because they've been pointed to as the problem here. Really, the issue seems to have been from management.
Right. They really had no. They didn't have to put that in there, but they did.
Yeah, they just threw that out there. You're literally snitching on yourself, which usually shows guilt, right? That's usually a sign of guilt.